It's harvest season for a lot of gardeners. It's also state fair and county fair time here in Oklahoma. And that's the time that we start thinking about what we might want to enter in the fair. You don't have to be a farmer or a member of a 4-H or FFA club to have entries in the state or county fairs around Oklahoma. If you've grown vegetables in your home garden such as these, you can enter them in the fair, win a few colorful ribbons. Sometimes there are small cash awards that come with it also. The one nice thing about entering in the fair is that it is open to anyone. You can just stop by your county OSU Extension office and pick up a fair rule book, either for your county fair or for one of our state fairs. In those books, it'll tell you, if you turn to the horticulture exhibits, which vegetables that you can enter in that particular fair. Also, you can find out how many you need to put on a plate. For instance, tomatoes may require 5 tomatoes on a plate to be exhibited. Okra, you may need 12 pods. So look over these books, decide what you have in the garden that you might want to enter. Today we're going to visit with you about making a home garden food basket for the fair and how to prepare some of these vegetables you see before me that you might want to groom a little, shine up a little, put on a plate, and enter in your county or state fair. We have some carrots here that we're going to clean up and get ready for the fair. When they first come out of the garden, they naturally have a lot of dirt caked on them, also a lot of small roots attached. When you're getting them ready for the fair, you just want to rinse them in water, gently rubbing. You don't want to brush them or anything or bruise the skin or scrape it. And then maybe pull off a few of these little secondary roots that are on here. Carrots, as with all other vegetables, need to be uniform in size and they need to be trimmed properly. Your fair book will tell you how many to put on a plate, and your county extension agent can tell you how to trim them up. These need to have about 1 inch of stem left on them. When you exhibit carrots, you'll want from 3 to 5 on a plate depending on the fair book, and just lay them on a plain white paper plate. The judges want all the plates to be the same so that they won't be biased by the background that the vegetables are laying on. Let's take a look at some of the other vegetables we have around here. We've got some winter squash that was picked earlier. This particular one is spaghetti squash. We have several to choose from. When you're entering spaghetti squash in the fair, you only need one. Again, it needs to be on a white paper plate. You want to pick one that doesn't have a lot of diseases on it or a bad ground spot. This is a fairly nice one. It's a good shape, nice uniform size. However, it has some scars on it, maybe from where a turtle or a rabbit scratched at it. It's hard to say. This one right here is fairly nice. All you need to do to prepare it for the fair is to take a rag and just gently wipe the dirt off. And then maybe take some clippers and trim the stem just a bit. You want to always leave on winter squash at least 1 inch of stem. Also, make sure that your winter squash is completely cured. You can do that by doing a little fingernail test and just making sure that that skin is hard. Some other winter squashes you might want to enter are acorn squash. Something the judges look for with acorn squash is a nice wide neck, because that means that if this were purchased in a store, you'd get plenty of meat in there to use for cooking. So that's a desirable trait. Again, you want a nice firm skin and have enough of a top on it. Some of the summer squashes are a little bit different. This is a zucchini that we pulled out of the garden. It's a little bit over mature. Still, you can easily pierce the skin with your thumb, and that's what we want with summer squash. We want these vegetables to be immature. Bigger is not always better when it comes to this type of squash. Leave a stem on it. Make sure you don't have any puncture wounds or diseases or insect damage. A lot of people like to grow the small patty pan type squash. This is considered a summer squash. So even though you may have some real large ones in the garden, you don't want to pick those. This is considered a rather ideal size. Again, the skin needs to be tender enough that you can puncture it with your thumbnail. Now these are some yellow crookneck summer squash that are way over mature. You can't enter them as gourds, and they really won't pass for summer squash because they've gotten far too big. However, they would look nice possibly in a home garden food basket. Among the other vine crops that you might want to enter in the fair are muskmelons or cantaloupes. Again, when you're selecting ones from your garden to enter, make sure that they're the type that if you were shopping in the store, you'd buy them. And that they're of a nice even size all over, good quality. This one is over mature. It's getting soft on the side. And it has some cracks where the vine was attached. Now this scar right here is very important when you're picking out cantaloupes to enter in the fair. It needs to be completely free of any plant tissue. The judge needs to know that when you pulled that away from the vine, it came away cleanly and that it was fully mature. This cantaloupe back here would have been a nice one. It's a nice even shape. However, the scar is starting to rot a little and sink out, so that would not be desirable. But you want a nice round shape, even netting over the skin. And you want to avoid cantaloupes that are lopsided or have little holes in them where a turtle or an animal may have dug. You want these vegetables to look as perfect as possible. Here's one that a lot of people enjoy growing, but don't quite know when to pick at the right time. This is a honeydew melon, and the vine won't always pull away cleanly from the scar on this side. So you check on the blossom end to make sure it's mature. Just push that with your thumb, and if it gives just a little bit, that means it's ready for picking. We have some sugar baby watermelons back here. On watermelon, about all you want to make sure of is that it doesn't have many scars on it. You want to, again, wipe it off with a towel before you bring it. And make sure that it's fully mature. Now this was small enough that it has no ground spot on it. We have another one here that's more typical of a lot of watermelons. It'll have either yellow or light yellow coloring on the bottom to indicate that it's mature. And that's something that the judges are going to look for when they look at your watermelons. Okay, some other things that we enter in the fair. Here's one that's real typical. Everybody enters tomatoes in the county or state fair. And from talking to a lot of gardeners, this has been kind of a tough year for growing tomatoes, so you may not have ones that are just tip-top. Probably the main priority in selecting tomatoes for the fair is to make sure that all of them you put on the plate are uniform. You want to have them placed face down, pretty much the same size, same color, and above all, you want to display the same variety. Now the rules may call for having 3 tomato plates or 5 tomatoes on a plate. You need to consult your county fair book to make sure you have the right number. This is something that's very important, particularly to the judges. If the rules say that you're only to have 3 tomatoes exhibited on a plate, and you've put 4 on there, your plate of tomatoes will probably be disqualified because the judge considers that unfair competition with the other people who are entering. On tomatoes, some other things you look for are avoiding any kind of cracks like these. That's a sign that they were grown under conditions where we had uneven watering. Sometimes that's unavoidable. And it could be that if everyone entered tomatoes with just a few cracks on them, then the judges will overlook that a little bit. However, spots like these are not overlooked by the judge, and these are something that you can avoid. Something I might caution you about is to pick your vegetables the morning before you take them to enter in the fair. The reason for that is that if you pick them a couple days in advance and put them in the refrigerator, you can start to get a little bit of breakdown on there. This is particularly true of some of the more fuzzy vegetables such as okra and things that tend to hold a lot of water on the surface. On tomatoes, something else you need to be careful about is not having green shoulders. You want the tomato to be all one color. Also, make sure the tomato is the right one for its class. These would be in a slicer type class of tomatoes. If you have some processing tomatoes, such as Roma variety, make sure that you enter them in the canning tomato category. If you have cherry tomatoes, make sure those are in the right category also. And again, pay attention to the number of tomatoes you're supposed to have on the plate. With cherry tomatoes, I believe many rules state that you need to have 12 tomatoes on the plate so that the judge will have more to look for. Onions are another popular vegetable to enter. And onions are something that, as a judge, I often see people enter with the skin peeled completely off, which is not proper. When you're preparing vegetables for the fair in general, you want to prepare them the way you would if you were trying to store them for a long time. These onions are nice and firm. Yes, they have the papery skin on them, and that may not look really pretty, but when that onion goes into storage, it will protect it and keep it from drying out. If you want to trim some of the roots on onions, that's okay, but leave at least about 1 inch on there. If you're going to trim the stem, first of all, make sure you select onions that have a completely dry stem and trim this to about 1 inch. You might want to wipe them off with a cloth. That would be about it for preparing it for the fair. You might want to fix up 3 to go on a plate. And make sure that you have all the same type of onion. These 2 onions are 2 different varieties. If you have those both on the same plate, they'll probably be disqualified. So you want them to be all one shape. Again, make sure that they're properly cured and that they would store well if you had to keep them in storage in your own home. Eggplant are a vegetable that are typical of people wanting to enter something really large. It's probably not necessarily the proper type of vegetable to enter or the proper size. When you're picking eggplant to enter in the fair, you want one that's about medium size, maybe 6 inches long and about 4 inches across. You want it to have a nice bright green cap on it, and trim this stem to about 1 inch long. You can see where clippers come in really handy when you're getting your vegetables ready for the fair. And then again, don't brush the surface of it, but just wipe it off if it's wet from the garden. Another important feature on eggplant is to have a nice small scar on there. With eggplant, usually you just enter 1 on a plate. Some other vegetables that we enter in the fair, a main one is peppers. When you're entering peppers, make sure that you use all the same color on one plate. It's important again that they have a stem on them and that be trimmed properly. And when you have all one color on the same plate, you want to make sure that they're a solid color. This is a green pepper that's becoming a red pepper. That's not a good one to enter in the fair because it really doesn't have a solid green color or red color. It's right in between. Same goes for yellow peppers. Make sure that they're completely yellow. Peppers are another vegetable that's important not to wash off when you first take them out of the garden. Don't hose them off. Just pick them, store them in a cool place, and then gently wipe them off with your rag and put them on the plate and exhibit them. Now, there are some vegetables that are a little more perishable than some of these we've been talking about. The main one is okra. When you're selecting okra for the fair, you want to pick it when it's small And be sure you pick it just before you take it to the fair. Unfortunately, these particular pods were picked a couple days ago, and we tried to hold them over to show you here on Oklahoma Gardening, and some of them have turned a little bit brown. Those would probably be disqualified by the judge, or at least given last place. This particular pod is a nice one. It's about 3 inches long, has a stem still on it. If you had a plate of 5 or 6 of those that are all uniform, they'd probably win first place. The opposite of that is having a really large okra pod. If you were buying okra in the store, you wouldn't purchase this. It's way too big. Here's some more okra. Again, have the same variety. Obviously these two are not the same variety of okra. I picked them from 2 different patches in the garden. Whenever you want to enter things in the fair, make sure that you have plenty with you at the time. Bring extra vegetables with you because you never know what accidents might occur along the way. You may drop them. They may be dropped on the floor or get dirty. So you want to make sure that you have plenty with you. Also, if you're thinking of planning a home garden food basket, you want to pick the vegetables that morning before you arrange them in there. The fair rules will usually tell you how many vegetables you can have in the basket. Make sure that you have just 3 to 5 and that they're all pretty much the same variety, like 3 kinds of red peppers, 3 yellow peppers, 3 red peppers, a few okra. We want them to be the proper maturity if possible. And also make sure that the basket does not compete with the exhibit. It's okay to take a little bit of straw and put that under the vegetables to kind of nest them on it, but you don't want to have a bright box that competes with the main attraction, which is the vegetables. Also, have them properly trimmed. This pepper needs to have the stem cut off just a little bit, as does this one. Something I might warn you about is that when the judges look these over, sometimes they'll pick up the vegetables and turn them over and make sure that they're all of the proper maturity and that they have no damage on them. So if you have some vegetables that are a little bit substandard, don't think you can just sneak them in on the home garden basket, because it has to be just as ideal and perfect as the vegetables that you enter on an individual plate. Another good thing about home garden food baskets is that you can arrange them just about any way you want. However, it helps if you contrast the colors. We have a patty pan squash here that looks nice against the dark green. However, we don't want too much yellow around it. So we'll put that back here, maybe put a red pepper up around it, give us a little bit of contrast in color. Something else you need to remember is that these baskets are going to be moved around some. When they're entered in the fair, they may be placed on one table and then shifted over and moved around for the judges to look at them. So you want it to be a fairly stable exhibit that won't fall to pieces once the judges start to look it over. It is allowable to place a piece of clear plastic over it to protect it and keep insects out and such. However, that will probably be removed by the judges. When you're selecting vegetables for the home garden food basket, pick ones that aren't too perishable, ones that will hold up, because once the ribbons are awarded, if your basket has a blue ribbon, it may be sitting there for several days with your name on it, so you want it to look nice. Last of all, when you're preparing exhibits for the fair, stop by your county extension office and pick up this 4-H exhibit preparation manual. In it, it will tell you how to prepare each individual vegetable and give you a good review of some of the things we visited about today. It costs 50 cents and it's available at each county extension 4-H office. Well, we hope that you'll go to some of our fairs here in Oklahoma and enjoy them, and even if you're not entering vegetables, when you see vegetable exhibits, maybe you'll have an appreciation for some of the preparation that goes into getting them ready for the fair. Well, good luck on your entries in the fair, and we'll see you next week on Oklahoma Gardening.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.